other side of that trauma, and you continue down that experience, and continue down your healing and learning, it brings out the beautiful side, because the trauma side is that's really hard to go through. I mean, living through your own trauma and dealing with that you've lived in this lifetime and then pulling in other lifetimes, it's very difficult process.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, you're correct. And obviously, psilocybin and a lot of these plant medicines will, with the use of DMT, activates the visual, and I think it, enhances our pineal gland, which is, many of you know, is the connection to the divine. And all of those areas are stimulated, and the brain is definitely turned on. All of the conversation around the subconscious runs 95% of our brain, and we only use 5% of our conscious mind. But all of the wires connect.
It does.
And so, yeah, that's a beautiful thing, and I'm actually very much an advocate for people to do whatever means that are in a safe, controlled environment. But to engage in plant medicine, I think, is a beautiful opportunity.
Yes, because of trauma, so much trauma in our entire life and all of our lives, when we're in this one, it really hurt. It rewires your brain. Every trauma rewires your brain, and so your brain, that part of your brain is stuck in that trauma. And I've done, and I continue to do microdosing on low level, so I don't have any experiences or inner journeys or anything. But I can see how much it is healing and rewiring my brain. And every time I do a session with somebody, I feel like it's healing me as long as it's helping them, and it's so beautiful.
Thank you. Yes, and same thing with EFT, with tapping. You get borrowed benefits. Okay. Because the practitioner in these kind of experiences, the practitioner is healing as well. And we've all heard about the psychologist who has a wife at home that's damaged, or the carpenter who has the doors aren't hung properly. So, everybody starts their journey because there's a shadow in their own life. And obviously this healing journey is a great opportunity to discover what your gifts are. But I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's beautiful. When you say EFT, is this tapping, or is it the eyes?
That is EMDR.
EMDR, okay,
yeah.
okay.
Emotional freedom technique is tapping.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's meridians. With the meridians, and and you're taking a class in that now?
Yeah, I have a whole chapter of it in my book. I've known about it and used it for many years, the basic level. But yes, I'm training now to be a clinical practitioner. That will focus on trauma healing. So, and why tapping works, by the way, why it's so important is that these meridians that's used in acupuncture points, it's been known for thousands of years. These meridians are all connected to our amygdala. Our amygdala is our fight or flight response, and it's where our brain gets the signal whether we're safe or not, and will turn, again, upregulate or downregulate the gene expression. And so these tapping signals are focusing on not only, and so it introduces, it's this, it has twofold, that it's called exposure therapy, because we're saying, while we're tapping, even though I feel immense pain in my body, we're acknowledging and sensing what we're experiencing. We're exposure to what's going on, rather than trying to, bypass it. And then we add in, I love and accept myself anyway, because we're doing a cognitive shift, and at the same time signaling to the body that we're safe, and which signals the brain that we're safe, and it can let down and release what it's holding back.
That's beautiful. Because I've used a little bit of that in my journey, but I think when I was doing it, I didn't have the capacity to understand how important it is, and so I'm glad you brought that up, because it makes me want to be more interested in using it more. And I have a granddaughter that's age 4, and she's just been diagnosed. She's on the spectrum, and so she has sensory overload, and I can see her because I remember growing up. I had 5 children growing up, and you're told, toddlers have fits, they have tantrums, all of this stuff. As I'm watching my granddaughter these past couple of years go through what her sensory overload, I could completely have understanding for it because what I was going through in my sensory overload in my nervous system. And I told my daughter, she's not having a fit, she's having a panic attack.
Yeah. Sensory overload for
Yeah.
sure.
And so it's completely changed my compassion towards children and young children, and especially where we live in this time, we have so much sensory overload.
Yeah.
And these poor children, and they're on their parents' phone or their TV because it's a great babysitter for that hour or whatever for the parents, and parents are on sensory overload. And it's such an important issue right now, only because now I know what that feels like.
Yeah, you're correct. And we live in a world that's overscheduled. We
Mhm.
live in a world where we're overstimulated chronically,
Mhm.
and children get bored within minutes. Back in the 40s and 50s, people could maintain attention on something by average 5 to 6 minutes, and commercials could be that. Now the average person can hold attention for 6 seconds. And so, and we're blipping in and out of consciousness all of the time, and we're going to the different levels all of the time. Of course, most people aren't privy to that. My suggestion to working with your granddaughter, as far as tapping is, and you could just have her, just hold here on the heart, on the heart center, and just touch the body and breathe. And then as far as tapping on the karate chop point right here, whatever feels comfortable, you don't have to do all of the whole basic, but just tapping on this and just have her start talking. Like, what does it feel like in your body? And then when in tapping, they always start with the level of distress, that we give a distress level of 0 to 10, and then we check in to see, because people forget, we all heard of when we had babies, and we're like, I'm never doing that again, and then 3 months later, I'm like, I know that there was a lot of pain, but you don't associate what that was, and I think we forget at some level, so we're willing to do it again. But so it's great to have a starting point. So on a scale of 0 to 10, how does this feel in your body if it's intense? But for children, all you have to do is say, if it was just a little bit of pain, it would just be a little bit. If you feel overstimulated, this much. So tell me how much, and just let her use her body to describe. So children like to use their body, and it helps because when we feel fear or overwhelmed, we all constrict. Our muscles constrict, even our pupils constrict, our nerves constrict, and so we kind of shrink down, which causes a lot of tension in the body and limits the emotions to move through the body. And as we know, our bodies are not meant to be holding tanks of emotions. It's supposed to be just a flow. And so for children, it's healthy just to say, show me all of those emotions, and what is it, and give language to it, and then add in the other senses. Where do you feel it in your body? Like, do you feel it right here, or do you feel it right here? And they'll tell you where they feel it, and then say, give us a color. What is it? If it was really angry, is it red? All of those colors. I'll say when any color is black, black is this indication that it's history that is still not resolved. That is, I've seen it every single time. Red means it's very, very, very present. And then somewhere on that spectrum, those colors tend to be, brown tends to be, it's so muddled by so many emotions, it's hard to articulate. Most people can only articulate 5 to 6 emotions. We have hundreds of emotions that we kind of will say, I'm either angry, depressed, happy.
Because every minute it's changing.
Yeah, it's changing all the time, and our chemistry inside is changing all the time.
Yes, constantly.
So, yeah. And
beautiful, thank you. I do have her hold her hips and breathe, and she knows how to give herself a little time. I need to go, and she puts a pillow over her head, and it just, for a minute or whatever, and she'll come back, and we'll talk about it, and we allow her to express herself. And I'm a completely different grandmother than I was as a mother.
Yeah.
I was a different mother than my mother, so generations, it's kind of been, thank God that it's kind of been helped and healed.
Mm-hmm.
But so she has a safe space of sharing that. But that was the next level I was looking for, that you have introduced to me. So thank you, I appreciate that.
You bet.
And so I want to look into that more, that tapping the EFT.
Yeah, EFT, emotional freedom technique.
Emotional freedom technique.
So
okay.
it's
and the colors is beautiful.
Yeah.
I like how you brought that in.
And one other thing that I would encourage is when she's in a happy, peaceful state, to have her describe her fate as something, a really beautiful place in nature, and then use all of the elements so that when she's in that stress response, have that be a memorized condition, and say, okay, remember when we're by the lake, and it's just, and then you bring in all of those sensory elements, and it smells really fresh, and we hear the little birds, and just have her close her eyes and just breathe, and just breathe.
It's beautiful that you said that, because we have a place, her and I, that we go to, and I'm actually writing her book
Oh,
on
very
it.
nice.
It's a magical place. So are you suggesting that I give her a memory of a place she's actually been to in right now in this
Whatever
life?
it
Does
is,
it matter?
it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Just something that she
Okay.
can anchor in.
Okay.
I remember when I was a child, why that matters to me is I remember when I was a child, when I would feel so afraid, I always would see Jesus among a whole bunch of wildflowers. And it just gave me a sense when I closed my eyes, and there was a lot of violence in my home. And so in order to escape that, I would close my eyes and think of that. And so it gives a sense of safety, even though this whole experience that I had Jesus on my right arm, that is enough to just feel like I'm not alone. And we live in a concrete world that's so much technology and stuff around us, that to anchor back into nature. So that the happy place I encourage to be nature, but
Yes, it is for
whatever
nature.
works. Yeah.
Yeah, with magical. We have unicorns and
Yeah,
fire
fantastic.
dragons, and she loves it. She has such a beautiful imagination. So does her grandma. It's interesting because my children don't have that, like
Well-
I do. It's like missed all my kids and went from me to her.
Oh, fantastic. Having those different images are really important as well, because what you're doing is you're bringing her brain, so her brainwave state in that stress response is in a high beta state. And in a high beta state, we have our attention is focused on one thing. And we encourage our kids to be in a high beta state. We're like, clean up your room, grab your shoes, pick that up, do your homework. And it's just this, all of this activity is just task oriented, and we encourage that for children. But when we're in a theta brainwave state, as you know, as a practitioner with QHHT, our goal is to get them in that theta brainwave state right before we go down into delta of sleep, but where we are in the bridge between the conscious and the subconscious mind. But that state, not only is it inspiration, but it's also intuition and imagination are all in that same state. So all of those are supportive.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Makes me feel like I'm on the right track.
You're on the right path.
Thank
for
you. I
sure.
appreciate it.
Yeah. Anybody else have any questions?
I wanted to make a comment. Excuse me. I read your book until I was trying to catch up last night. So I got to the chapter on nutrition, which I haven't read yet, but I did read the very last chapter on the Caregiver's Guide. And so divine timing, that book just helped me a lot.
Are you a caregiver? Me too.
Yeah, thank you. There's definitely, I mean, obviously, this has been a couple of years ago that I wrote this. There's things I would definitely add about how I think navigating when there's a loss. I've had, my mother-in-law just barely passed last week, but I've been very fortunate to be in the 11th hour with people who are crossing over, and two very close people in my life who died of cancer, and that, I think that's just such an evil way to die. A horrific way. But it's such a beautiful gift to be in that presence. And people say dumb things, they're just going to.
Well, I was really proud because a lot of the stuff in the chapter I was already doing.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
And so, my favorite chapter was convalescing,
Yeah,
because
that one's deep.
I'm
that one's
on
hard.
a healing journey myself.
Yeah.
I was injured in February, and I'm a caregiver. So it's like, you can't have any time off.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, it's really good to give yourself permission to convalesce
Yeah,
and to heal. And that was my favorite thing.
thank you. That convalescent chapter makes me cry.
I'm
Still-
crying now.
Still,
And,
it's a really tough chapter for me to get through, because that was a really, really, really vulnerable
But it really
time.
helped me because, I guess it's the things that are ingrained in our brain. I'm a high energy person,
Mhm.
and if I sit and just, like, I can watch a movie, no problem. But it's like, if I'm not up doing something, being productive, then that's considered lazy.
Yeah.
It's a society. we
That
live in.
society is
Yeah.
programmed that if we're not doing, that we're lazy, and we have been conditioned that we're human doing rather than human being. But all of that is anchored in worthiness, and that's, my talk is gonna be predominantly around that level of worthiness, because we don't feel worthy to give ourselves that love and attention. And I've seen lifetimes where those were all anchored in, where I was a slave, where I gained good favor by being the hard worker. And because my father was such a violent man, when he'd come home at night, we would scramble like cockroaches in the light, and everybody would hurry up and clean. And so that was the way we knew we weren't gonna get beat, is we stayed really busy.
I experienced that as
And
well.
so
Yeah.
it's just, it kind of sucks, because it conditions us that our value, and my father made it very clear, his love was conditional, and it was based upon, how we showed up. So,
But I'm not lazy anymore. I'm
No.
convalescing.
yeah.
I just love
Yeah.
it. People go, "How are you doing today?" Like the guy that delivers our oxygen for my husband.
Mhm.
"How are you doing today?" "I'm convalescing."
Oh, very nice. And,
That's
And you
confusing
get
enough
some
for him
weird
to just
looks,
kinda
Yeah.
but I'm like convalescing, and then I explained your definition of it,
Yeah, 'cause
what's
most
really
people
in the
don't know that
dictionary,
definition.
and so I'm educating people as well.
this book was gonna be called The Art of Convalescence. But
Oh.
I just knew a lot of people wouldn't understand that, so my publisher had me rename it. But that's why convalescence was very, very important to me too.
And then I already knew about law of the thoughts and the words become things, and that's part of my training as a foot zone therapist.
Mhm.
But it was such a good reminder, because I did experience just being in pain, and just, it's all you can do is just kind of be in that moment and,
Yeah.
and go somewhere else. So it was really, I liked that. I can't remember what chapter it was, but just being in the present moment and not thinking about escaping to the future or the past. And part of my husband's, I think part of his pain is he's stuck a lot in the past, and that's where he was happier, because he's not happy in his body. And so, is there a way I can help him? I think tapping might help him a lot.
Tapping would be great, yeah. I'll reach out to you, and I'll come and do some sessions with you guys when I'm working on those when I'm doing my training, when I'm doing hand in hand. I'll
Awesome, thank you.
Me too, me
You
too.
bet.
I want to volunteer.
You bet.
Thank
You bet.
you.
That'd be lovely.
Okay.
But yes, why that matters to be in the present time. We've all heard that, we have depression and anxiety based upon whether our attention's predominantly in the future or in the past. But when we're in those, our brains are time travelers, so we can have any kind of sensory memory and go right back to that moment. And we're signaling our body to release the same chemicals based upon that experience. But in the present time, we remove the 3D matrix that holds so much of our attention, and we move our attention away from matter into more energy. And we need to access, all of the answers are in our field of energy, but we shrink our possibilities when we're in a fearful state or in a confined state emotionally. And so the way I look at it is our auric field and our heart field, science has already shown that it can extend 15 feet beyond the body, but that's when it's in a coherent state. And when our brain waves are in a very incoherent state, when we're fighting all the time, always looking for the threat external, then we shrink that attention. It becomes very incoherent. And so the signals from divine support, we've all had moments where we think, God clearly abandoned me, because my time when I need help and I'm praying, God, please help me, that's when we feel like we don't get any support, where we feel like life isn't worth living, and we get very negative and very victim mentality because we're stuck in this 3D matrix. But all of us have also had moments where we're in that state of just homeostasis, where we have